It was Valentine's Day in 2020, and Dr. Amie Harwick wasn't thinking about love. She wasn't waiting for flowers or chocolates or some grand romantic gesture. She didn't need a man to make the night special because she had herself, her career, and her friends. And what better way to celebrate than a night out in Hollywood? She had built her career on love, relationships, and empowerment. She was a published author, a therapist, and an advocate. In many ways, she had it all. But as she drove home through the winding roads of Hollywood Hills, looking out over the glittering lights of Los Angeles, she didn't know that someone else was waiting for her inside the shadows of her own home. By the time Amie stepped out of her car and walked through the front door, her fate was already sealed. At 1:02 a.m., she sent her very last text message. "Send me the pictures of the green couch." 12 minutes later, she was screaming for her life. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kimbyrleigha, and if you've never been here before, it's nice to finally meet you. I can't believe it's already almost the third month of the year, and wow, do I feel like I haven't been sticking to all of my goals for 2025 when it comes to getting fit and staying healthy. I mean, we're trying, right? But I am going to give myself a little bit of credit. I've been doing one thing a day for my health, and that's taking Groons. And they're kindly partnering with me and sponsoring today's video. I've shared Groons with you before, and they're still part of my daily routine and an easy and delicious one to stick to. Groons are gummy vitamins designed to provide comprehensive daily nutrition. And I started taking Groons because, let's be honest, I hate swallowing a bunch of pills. But the truth is, most supplements fall short. Basic multivitamins are limited. Greens powders, I found them to be messy and I hated the taste. A probiotic, that's only part of the puzzle. But Groons is all of those things and more packed into just 8 delicious gummies a day, and they really do taste good. They're like a fruit snack. Not only has it simplified my routine, but it's also a fraction of the price of buying everything separately. And you might be wondering, why 8 gummies? Well, that's because cramming 20 plus vitamins and minerals and 60 plus whole food ingredients into one gummy is not realistic. Generic multivitamins only contain around 7 to 9 vitamins, but Groons deliver a powerhouse formula without the fillers. No artificial colors or flavors. They're vegan, nut-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, and they come in low sugar or a sugar-free option, and they're made from pectin, which is from fruit, not gelatin, which contain animal byproducts. So check your nutrition labels. Groons is more comprehensive and accurately dosed, which is important. Most supplements throw together a generic, high-dose formula without even considering the safety. Groons is different. It provides 100% of your daily needs for essential vitamins and 25% for minerals that can be harmful in excess. Watch out for daily values that are over 100% because too much of a good thing isn't actually good for you. Plus, Groons provides gut health, beauty, energy, immunity, recovery, and cognitive benefits. They contain 6 times the gut-supporting ingredients versus the leading greens powder. Biotin and niacinamide for stronger hair and nails and glowing skin. They also have a mushroom blend to support cognition and fight against brain fog, and I know I need that. Groons gummies also have vitamin C to combat stress-induced free radicals and keep you feeling your best. At the end of the day, Groons isn't just another supplement. It's a smarter way to nourish your body, one daily pack, and no guesswork. And it's a taste that you'll actually look forward to. So if you're ready to feel the difference, try Groons today. You can get a discount for using my link below in the description box. And thank you so much to Groons for sponsoring today's video. I've been wanting to talk about this case for at least 2 years, and it has been really hard for me. I learned so much about every person I research, and I have to admit that some stick with me more than others. I'm human. We connect with other humans as we get to know more about them, and I've never felt as connected to Amie as I did with anyone else I've talked about on this channel, which made that very difficult for me to tell her story. I don't usually share any of this because I've definitely felt like this before with other stories, but every time I tell myself, they need to be told. So no matter how hard it is for me to tell you this story, Dr. Amie Harwick should always be remembered. Before she was a published author and a therapist to Hollywood's elite, Amie Harwick was just a girl with big dreams. She was a daughter, a sister, and a best friend. She was a fire dancer, a model, a student, and a mentor. She was a woman who loved hard, lived loud, and refused to be anyone but herself. And that made her unforgettable to so many people. Amie Nicole Harwick was born on May 20th of 1981 in Sellersville, Pennsylvania, a borough on the outskirts of Philadelphia. She was in the foster care system until she was 11 months old when she was adopted by her parents, Penny and Tom Harwick. Amie grew up in Lansdale, Pennsylvania with her little brother, Christopher. He was adopted around the time that Amie was 4. And like most brother and sister relationships, they had a loving rivalry together, but they shared a lot in common as they grew up. Their most common interest were concerts. Music was Amie's first love. She would go with Chris to heavy metal shows, even got her parents involved in loving them as well. She loved dancing to the Beach Boys with her mom. Amie's favorite artists were Depeche Mode, Tori Amos, Nine Inch Nails, and later Christina Perri. She was a 90s kid, and I'm sure many of you can relate to her childhood. Amie hopped around a few schools when she was younger, which meant she went through the awkward teenage phase of not knowing exactly where she fit in. But she could always make friends wherever she went. Amie was a warm, empathetic, and enthusiastic person who would go out of her way to ask how you were doing and give you a hug. She loved meeting new people from all walks of life. Amie loved to experiment with makeup and style, and in high school she wore fishnets, combat boots, cheetah print skirts, black chokers, heavy eye makeup, lip liner, and of course, the thin 90s brows. She had curtain bangs and dyed her hair every color of the rainbow, from purple to orange to blonde, and then finally settling on black. I looked the exact same way in high school, and I'm sure many of you still rock the band t-shirts, the animal print, and those things are actually coming back. Amie was highly intelligent and excelled in social sciences, especially history and psychology. Amie worked hard. Her first 2 jobs were at the local mall, where she worked in retail at Wet Seal. Remember that store? I used to love that store. And a pretzel shop. Once Amie graduated from North Penn High School in 1999, she had a head start compared to her peers. Amie knew from day one she wanted to study psychology and become a therapist so that she could help people. Sometimes people don't know what they want to do, but Amie knew exactly what she wanted, what her dream was. Amie's friends said she always made them feel like they were the most important person in the room. She was motivated by her curiosity and passions, and she was unapologetically herself. Out of high school, she met a musician in a heavy metal band. His name was Tommy Decker, and they both had the same dream, Hollywood. It was a big move, over 3,000 miles away, but Amie felt like she could do anything. They signed a lease and packed up their bags, and they moved across the country. Amie was nervous because her greatest fear was actually being disconnected from her friends and family and her loved ones. She didn't want to lose anyone. She made the conscious effort to stay in touch with her extended family, and every year Amie flew in for their annual cookie baking day, and this was a huge party where everyone brought Philly cheesesteaks, pork rolls, and Lebanon bologna. If you're from Pennsylvania, then you would know. Chris joined the armed forces and married his wife Carey and had 2 children. Amie called Chris regularly, even when Chris was deployed overseas. She still maintained that really strong relationship with her brother. And after Amie's move to California, her marriage unfortunately ended in divorce. They just grew apart. But Amie found another love, California, and Amie fit right in with the fast-paced social lifestyle. In 2001, she attended Cal Poly in Pomona and earned a bachelor's degree in psychology. Amie then pursued her master's in psychology from Pepperdine University. There was already a lot of schooling, and Amie was able to pay herself through college. Amie valued health and fitness, especially kickboxing and dancing. Working out was her primary stress relief, which was important because she was very busy. She started a personal training business in 2002, teaching Pilates for over a decade. She even released her own workout DVD called Fit to Rock.
Hey, this is Amie Nicole, and welcome to my Fit to Rock workout video.
And she starred in music videos and even produced a music video for the song Resurrection by Kimbyrleigha. Amie worked as a bartender, a go-go dancer, and even a clown. She walked on stilts. I hadn't seen it, but I've heard about it. She was always getting invited to these big Hollywood parties, and she was so talented. She was also a fire eater. One time, Amie's friend Mark Hunter was surfing the TV, and he stopped on an episode of The Real Housewives, and he was like, wait a minute, is that Amie Harwick? And yes, it was. It was Amie doing her fire-swallowing act in the background of a video on TV. Amie was a natural on stage and in front of the camera. She did modeling under the name Amie Nicole, and she worked for clothing lines like Stop Staring and Coffin Case. Once she was even invited to the Playboy Mansion, where the brand sponsoring her favorite outfits was AMI Clubwear. And Amie figured, you know what? It wouldn't hurt to reach out to them because she loved their clothing, and she asked them to provide her costumes for her fire-eating performances. And it pays off to, I guess, cold email or cold call because she was sent 4 sparkly vintage burlesque outfits. And through modeling and performing, Amie was able to support herself and her college endeavors. She felt self-empowered, and she networked and made connections with hundreds of people. And in her free time, she attended concerts, art exhibitions, and even her friends' burlesque shows. She even did promo videos on AMI Clubwear's YouTube channel.
Are you ready for some high heel facts? Okay, here we go.
And I had the pleasure of learning a lot about Amie from these videos. It's where I got a lot of this information from Amie herself, like this one, all about who she was growing up. And let's just hear it from Amie.
Hey, this is Amie Nicole, and I'm with AMI Clubwear today for my Meet the Model video. In high school, I would say I was a little bit awkward. I was definitely pretty alternative. I listened to rock and roll and heavy metal. In school, I would wear ripped up fishnets with combat boots, a leopard print skirt, and probably a 9 Inch Nails t-shirt.
I also liked getting all the details on her makeup routine because she was absolutely gorgeous, especially her favorite lip color, which I'm actually wearing today in her honor. She did an entire makeup tutorial on AMI Clubwear's videos. For Amie, living in California meant that her style transformed. She loved full glam makeup with dark eyeliner and red lipstick. Friends compared her to a grown-up Wednesday Addams with an alternative vintage and goth-inspired wardrobe. Amie wore black lace, hair flowers, and top hats. She wished she could dress like it was 1969 every day of her life. Amie was also interested in horror movies, true crime, and collecting vintage items. She would regularly go to auctions, and she once bid on and won undergarments belonging to Sharon Tate. If you don't know who that is, but you watch true crime, you probably recognize the Manson family murders. Well, unfortunately, Sharon Tate was one of their victims. If you've ever seen the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sharon is played by Margot Robbie. Amie actually displayed Sharon's bras in her large walk-in closet. They were actually in a glass box that she had on display. She was a collector through and through. She collected taxidermy animals as well. And I looked into this because Amie was such an animal lover, it kind of confused me, but it turns out this is what they call ethical taxidermy, and I think it's really cool, and it is a beautiful art once you understand it. When animals die of natural causes, taxidermy is a way to preserve them and remember them the way that they were, and Amie proudly displayed them in her home because she loved them so very much. She also owned a coffin and was fascinated by specimens preserved in formaldehyde jars. Amie's favorite number was 13, and her favorite color was orange. There were so many things that made Amie unique. But now let's talk about love. At 28 years old, Amie was still in her master's program, and she started dating a guy named Gareth. Now, he was 6'4", charming, and worked as an IT professional and software engineer. He was also an aspiring stand-up comedian and a photographer. Gareth considered Amie his muse. He was always taking pictures of her, and Amie introduced him to her friends and family, including her best friend, Grace Stanley. Grace thought Gareth was devoted to Amie, but she also thought he was kind of average. I think most of us have friends who have dated someone that we aren't quite sure about, and you don't want to be raining on their parade or anything, but you're also kind of unimpressed. Well, that was Gareth. Gareth moved in to Amie's apartment, but over time, Amie did start to realize that Gareth did not really have her best intentions in mind. He was kind of keeping her from following her dreams in her career, and the relationship kind of became one of those like on-again, off-again ones. In 2011, Amie broke up with Gareth for good, which actually changed what Amie wanted out of her life. It came at a very hard time. She was going through a lot of changes and actually deciding what she wanted to study and what she wanted to do when she got out of school. She knew she wanted to do psychology, but she was wondering what route she should go down because there are a lot of different venues you can do in psychology. Let me tell you what was going on. First, Amie was working with counseling juvenile offenders at a local prison, but someone hacked into her computer, and they used Amie's email to send very sensitive information, including nude photographs of her, to her place of employment. And Amie ended up losing her job. She didn't know who had done this to her, but it scared her. And of course, she was devastated. She was scared that somebody was out there doing this malicious stuff to her, and she didn't know who. She was also concerned about her future. If this kept happening and she kept losing opportunities, that was going to be really hard for her. So in December of 2011, she graduated with her master's, but she needed a break. Amie learned she had an underlying health condition, so she quit drinking alcohol, she embraced sobriety, But this meant she lost friends in the process. This is really hard. But there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Amie actually interned with a therapist named Mashumi Ghosh, and she felt so inspired to counsel men and women who survived toxic and traumatic relationships. So this is how she's kind of getting on the path that she wants to take. She was in relationships that didn't go well. She was interning for someone that did relationship and trauma advice. And Amie decided that she wanted to help improve other people's relationships, whether it came from setting boundaries or having healthy intercourse with a partner. That's when Amie decided to go into a PhD program at the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality, and she became a doctor, not an MD, but a PhD. She was licensed in marriage and family therapy and started her very own private practice. Amie treated people from all backgrounds, but she specialized in psychological disorders like bipolar and borderline personality. She counseled women who experience harassment, stalking, and domestic violence. She worked with men and women who had PTSD from sexual exploitation, adult material addictions, intimate dysfunction, and more. She formed connections with experts like Dr. Hernando Chavez, another graduate of the Human Sexuality Program. And in 2014, Amie published a book called The New Sex Bible for Women, The Complete Guide to Sexual Self-Awareness and Intimacy. Amie was a brilliant writer. She published articles in Elite Daily about self-esteem, self-care, setting boundaries, and educating people about intercourse and safety. Amie encouraged healthy behavior surrounding intimacy, and I think this is so important. There is a huge stigma around intercourse and talking about it, but it's a major part of a successful relationship, which was Amie's goal to help provide her clients. And as a published author, Amie was growing her online presence as well. She posted uplifting quotes on her Instagram and Facebook, reminding people to drink water and get a good night's sleep. On Valentine's Day, she posted this in 2020, quote, "Platonic love is important too. There is so much cultural emphasis on romantic love, but let's be thankful for the authentic love that we give and receive to friends," end quote. Amie even had her own YouTube channel as a relationship coach. She filmed videos about setting boundaries, coping with fears, surviving breakups, and enduring tough family holidays. Because of her online advocacy work, she starred on TV shows and podcast episodes. She was on the show Addicted to Sexting and the podcast Datey Ladies, and Amie was a special guest. She also ran an online networking group called Foxy Feminist to help LA women get job opportunities and meet other career-minded women in the area. Amie really did it all. But she wasn't just about talking about it, she did it. She was constantly bettering herself, helping others, and heightening her awareness of social issues. One cause that Amie was very passionate about was providing free and low-cost mental health services to people that worked in the adult industry. This field of work is very stigmatized, and I know it can be easy to judge things that we don't understand, know about, or consider taboo. But because of the stigma, it makes it harder for people who work in this field to get help, the help that they really need. Many sex workers face higher risk of addiction and mental health problems. In 2018, an organization called Pineapple Support was founded in response to the rising numbers of adult film stars taking their own lives. Amie was vetted by Pineapple Support. She was on their website, listed as a private provider who was accepting new clients. But Amie herself was still facing setbacks. A former friend, and this is for unknown reasons, had tried to sabotage her career. In 2015, this friend harassed Amie on text and email, and Amie decided she had to file a restraining order against this woman. She was also getting a lot of anonymous comments online that were derogatory and untrue. People would give Amie one-star reviews on her doctor's website or even make nasty comments on her social media. And Amie, of course, did not know who was doing this, which is very frustrating and just kept on happening. But things were starting to look up in July of 2017. Amie met a new man. She was attending a party thrown by a well-known Hollywood producer, and she hit it off with one of the guests. His name was Drew Carey. He's the famous actor and comedian that hosts The Price is Right. Well, they got to talking and they hit it off, and Drew invited her on their first date to Disneyland. He told her to bring all of her friends, and she did. There were about 10 of them that attended. Amie and Drew fell in love fast. They had so much fun together. They had dance parties in their kitchen, and Drew got Amie a collection of poison bottles, which she put on display in her home. Before she knew it, they were engaged, and they debuted their relationship on the game show Price is Right. It was in 2018 on the Valentine's Day episode. Here's a clip of Amie and Drew walking arm in arm onto the stage. Amie's wearing a pink, red, and black floral dress, and she looks absolutely stunning. Unfortunately, Drew was, of course, in the spotlight. which meant that Amie was too. Amie and Drew would go out, and then all these anonymous comments would flood in on her social media. And Amie was afraid that the spotlight would jeopardize her career. It put a lot of pressure on their relationship. They tried to work it out through therapy, but it ended up in them separating before the end of 2018. It was really hard, but Amie really did value where she was going in her career. But by 2020, at the age of 38, Amie was happily single. She lived at 2086 Mound Street in the Hollywood Hills, a scenic area of Los Angeles that's known, of course, for the giant Hollywood sign. I'm sure you've seen it. Amie's Tudor-style home was brown and beige with blue trimmed windows, and the interior was beautiful. It had an ornate staircase with decorations that remind me of the Sistine Chapel. It's vintage and old Hollywood. Amie's bedroom, the primary suite, was on the 3rd floor. Her balcony overlooked the back patio, a zen porch space with a little garden surrounded by a tall fence. Amie had a roommate named Michael Herman. He lived on the 1st floor in a smaller bedroom. He had previously been the roommate of Amie's very close friend and photographer, Robert Koshland. Robert was also a project manager and a fundraiser. He got married in 2019 to one of Amie's friends, Cleopatra. After Robert and Cleopatra's wedding, Michael moved out of their place and into Amie's place in October. Michael worked long, irregular hours and traveled many months of the year, and Michael had Robert's vote of confidence, so Amie felt safe having him around. At the end of January, Amie and her brother Christopher had a conversation on Facebook. Chris had spent the past year deployed in Afghanistan, but he was set to return to Pennsylvania in early February. And as they talked, Amie kept things light. She didn't mention anything negative, but she did send pictures of the love of her life, her cat, Marquis. He was a snowshoe Siamese that Amie adopted as an emotional support animal, and Amie loved to dress him up in costumes and do photo shoots. And she had recently gone into photography, so there was even more of this coming, and she created an Instagram just for Marquis. Chris didn't know that this would be the last conversation he ever had with his sister. On Valentine's Day 2020, around the time that COVID was starting to hit the US, Amie woke up at 6:30 in the morning and her friend Cleopatra came over for a sunrise hike through the Hollywood Hills. When Cleopatra arrived, Amie threw on a red cardigan to celebrate the day of love. Amie gave Cleopatra a tour of her favorite landmarks, and they stopped for breakfast at the Beechwood Cafe, where Amie talked about all of her recent accomplishments. She was happy and she was healthy and exactly where she was meant to be in life. That evening, Amie went out for a Valentine's Day celebration with her friends Sarah Rollins and Rebecca Jalad to support their other friend Taj Sherman at a Beauty of Burlesque show. Amie dressed up. She drove to the Globe Theater on Broadway, and they danced and they cheered and they took pictures with a disposable camera. And after the show, Amie posed for a photo with her friends. She was wearing a pink velvet bodycon dress, a leather jacket, 2 cross necklaces, leather boots, and a white and gold clutch. I do need to point something out. I saw so much criticism for Amie wearing a rosary-style necklace. These are very popular. I'm actually wearing a similar one from my collection, and all the boutiques in LA have them. I was very surprised to see other women bashing this poor woman. It's very common in many cultures to even wear real rosary beads, so please leave those comments off of this video. It's a necklace, and we're talking about someone who lost their life. Those petty, harsh judgments, they really bother me. I don't always speak up about them, but I do block them in my comment section. We don't even know the significance. It could be just for fashion, but it could also be very personal. It could be an heirloom of a loved one. We do not know. But anyway, that night, Tosh invited Amie to an after party, but Amie wanted to wind down. She told Tosh she loved her and she would see her later. Amie, Sarah, and Rebecca ended the night at the Nomad. This is a restaurant and bar with a green suede couch, fancy decorations, and they drank non-alcoholic drinks and took photos. Amie ordered tea, but by midnight, they were all very exhausted, so they went their separate ways. Amie left and started her drive through the twisting roads in the Hollywood Hills towards her home. Amie pulled into her driveway about 1 a.m., pulled her car into her garage, and sat in the car as she texted Rebecca asking for pictures from that night. Amie's last text to Sarah was at 1:02 a.m., which said, "Send me the pictures of the green couch." Sarah sent the pictures at 2 o'clock, but Amie never replied. Sarah just figured she'd probably gone to bed. But back at 1:14 a.m., just 12 minutes after Amie sent that last text, 911 received a call from Michael Herman, her roommate. And I have a recording of this call, but it is not very clear. But I do think it's important to hear the panic in Michael's voice. So I'm going to play it for you now.
I want to reduce the operator 434.
Yeah, somebody just attacked my roommate. We're at 2086 Mound Street. Find anything.
Okay, how was he assaulted? What happened?
It's a C. I don't know. I was downstairs. I heard screaming. Please get a cop here.
Okay, this is who's screaming inside?
Can't think right now. Amie Harwick.
I mean, who is she to you, sir?
She's my roommate.
Okay. Is she screaming for help?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see anything?
No.
Okay, so
No,
what
I
did you hear?
heard her screaming, and I heard her being...
All right, so I'm going to send out that somebody's screaming, okay? Since you didn't see anything. You don't know if she's being attacked, you're not sure.
Yes, I know she's being attacked. I heard her got thrown to the ground.
At first, it is just chaos. Michael says his roommate is being attacked upstairs. He didn't see anything, but he thinks that because he heard a scream. The operator tries to clarify, and Michael says, no, I heard her screaming, and I heard her being strangled. And the operator said, all right, well, I'm going to send somebody out for screaming, okay? Since you didn't see anything. You don't know if she's being attacked. You're not sure. But Michael was frustrated. He says, well, yes, I know she's being attacked. I heard her get thrown to the ground. Michael was also heard saying to the operator, oh my God, I'm going to hang up on this bitch. I understand, these are very high-paced environments that these operators have to deal with. The operator is trying to get as much information as she can to send out the right kind of help. But Michael is concerned for his roommate, concerned for her life. So it was getting very frustrating. The operator finally gets his information, including the name and address, and asks if this is Michael's phone number. Michael says no. He borrowed another man's phone to make this call. The man was standing next to him, and he's heard on the 911 call agreeing that Michael could be called back at this number. Michael says he will be standing outside in the driveway. It was a lot. And 5 minutes later, police were not there. Michael placed yet another call to 911, telling them to hurry up. Michael had heard Amie screaming for minutes, but now the house was quiet. To Michael, it felt like an eternity that police were taking to arrive. The problem was that Officer Daniel Fisick and his partner thought they could get to their destination without using GPS. There are so many winding roads in Hollywood Hills that they accidentally took a wrong turn. So they finally had to put on their GPS, and they finally arrived minutes later. But it took them much longer than usual. At this point, they didn't know what was happening. Remember, the call was about a screaming person. It could have been anything. It could have been a party. When they pull up, they see an agitated man in the driveway wearing a white shirt, which appeared to have bloodstains on it. He was bleeding from his stomach, his arm, and his hand. It was Michael. He explained that he had been violently woken up to the sound of blood-curdling screams coming from upstairs. At first, he thought his roommate Amie might have seen a mouse and screeched, but it went on and on.
Hey, sir. Hi. How can I help you?
My roommate was attacked. I know it. I heard it. She's screaming. She was thrown to the ground. I couldn't find my phone. I couldn't find anything.
Okay, hold on. Okay, so you have access to here?
No.
Is there anybody else inside the house?
My roommate.
Just your roommate by herself?
Yes.
You didn't check on her?
Dude, I heard screaming. I don't know if that guy had a gun or a knife. I came running I couldn't find my phone.
So is there somebody else inside?
Yes. I think there's
Okay, sir, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Calm down. Calm down. Other than your roommate, is there anybody else inside the house?
I don't know.
So you didn't see anyone? You just heard...
No, I just heard her screaming. It
Have you
sounded
called-
like she got thrown to the ground. I've been calling for her through his windows. Nobody's answering. Nothing.
Michael then went to his doorway and he yelled, Amie, over and over again, but she did not say anything back. He could still hear her screaming. He went back to his bedroom trying to find his phone. That's when he heard a loud thud that he thought sounded like two bodies falling to the ground. And that is when Amie's screams became muffled, but they were still continuing. He heard a strenuous coughing sound, and then Michael was still looking for his keys in his phone for several minutes. And finally, he screamed, hey, up the stairs, hoping that Amie's attacker would hear him and get scared and stop. Then, Michael, not knowing what to do, realized that this was getting serious. He ran for help. He went out the back door onto the patio, scaled the tall gate, ran to their closest neighbor's house and knocked on their door, but he got no answer. He ran across the street to another neighbor, but they didn't answer. Then luckily, he saw someone walking down the street, and that man let Michael borrow his phone and place the 911 call. Now, he was locked out of his own house with the cops asking a lot of questions. Michael did not give as much detail as I just did. He was panicked and he wasn't making much sense. He was definitely explaining things in a very jumbled order. He was cursing. He was upset that people weren't taking him seriously. And finally, one of the officers was like, listen, you need to calm down. He didn't know what to believe. Here was a guy without an ID, without his phone, standing with blood on his shirt outside of a locked house. Was he intoxicated? Was he mentally unstable? There wasn't any commotion that they could hear going on in the house, and they kept telling Michael he needed to relax because he was making the situation much worse. I feel like there are some people that when they're told to relax, it puts them more on edge, and Michael seemed to be one of those people. He couldn't really even take it anymore. He was walking up and down the driveway as the officers were standing there asking, well, what are we supposed to do? He kept telling them, just do what I did. Jump the fence. But they weren't understanding why this random guy doesn't have a key to his own home that he's saying he lived in. Michael kept repeating, just jump the fence. That's what they needed to do to get back inside the backyard. So finally, after a lot of back and forth that seemed very unnecessary and was honestly hard for me to watch, the cops hopped the fence.
So where's your key at?
Inside, downstairs, the back door's open. Here, come on.
Here, let's do it. You're good. You good. 6815 advises the responding unit, so we had to hop the fence. We're going to be at the rear of the location.
Fisek and his partner climbed over. They landed in the backyard with Michael right behind them. As they turned the corner of the home, that's when they saw a woman collapsed on the concrete pavement of the patio. She was just beneath the third-floor balcony. Michael began to panic. He was calling out Amie's name and screaming the F word over and over again.
Sir, come here. Relax. Take a seat.
Oh my God.
What was going on tonight?
I've been asleep all night.
It was Amie. She was face down, her head tucked beneath her shoulder, and it was clear that she had injuries to her neck. Fisek's partner had already called an ambulance and also for backup. They didn't want to move her in case she had a spinal injury, but from what they could tell, Amie was experiencing a seizure.
Bro, she's having a seizure. Oh, Jesus.
She was unresponsive, but miraculously, she was still alive. Michael was, of course, freaking out, and the officer brought him back into the home and had him wait in his bedroom, asking Michael what Amie had been doing that night. Michael said he had no idea. He was asleep until he heard the screams. Fisek and the other officers who arrived as backup by this point could hear voices in the house, so they did a full sweep with their guns drawn in case Amie's attacker was still there.
Anyone else inside? This is the LAPD. Come out with your hands up. Anyone else inside? This is the LAPD. Come out with your hands up. Gotcha. I got an open room. There's a balcony to the top.
It turned out the voices had just been on TV. Nobody else was in this home. And from their initial observations, everything looked normal, except for when they got to the balcony. This was the balcony attached to Amie's bedroom. They found a syringe full of an amber liquid. Fisek assumed that this was heroin. He put the pieces together in his mind. Did Amie have a wild night out? Come home intoxicated, fall off her balcony? Or was Michael somehow involved? After all, he was the only person in the house and he had a very odd story. He was locked out. There was blood on him. So of course they went back to press him even further about his claims, but they remained the same. They also asked him if Amie did drugs. Michael said no, not at all. She doesn't even drink. She's completely sober.
So there's a loaded syringe on this right here. Sir, do you know her history of drug use?
That she's sober. She doesn't drink. She didn't even drink.
She doesn't drink.
She doesn't even drink. She's sober.
Okay, so she's sober completely.
She's sober completely.
How sure of that are you?
I'm positive. I'm absolutely sure.
The EMTs arrived and they took Amie to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And Officer Fisek returned to Michael's room to ask him even more questions. By this time, Michael had found his phone, his wallet, his keys, and he provided his driver's license. His room was cluttered and Michael was frazzled, probably due to shock. He explained that he had been working overtime for weeks and he had Valentine's Day off, so he had drifted in and out of sleep most of the day, falling asleep around 6 p.m. If there was a break-in, he didn't hear it. He didn't know when Amie got home either, and he didn't know when she initially left the house. Officer Fisek asked Michael if Amie owned syringes. Michael said no, that she did not have any prescription meds that required a syringe or needle. Amie was a happy person, and he said she had no reason to risk her life. Michael insisted she was attacked, so the officers figured that if there was a loaded syringe there, maybe it was brought there by her attacker, but why? Fisek asked Michael if him and Amie had ever been in a relationship, and Michael said no, they met through a friend, Robert, Amie's best friend. Fisick then looked closer at Michael's wounds from jumping the fence, as he said, and they did look like they matched that. He had seen Amie's wounds, and we'll go into that more in detail later, but she did not look like she had the same type of wounds, so he concluded that they were not in a fight together. At this point, Michael was explaining his thought process when he heard Amie screaming. He said his first thought when he woke up was to go and confront the attacker. He planned to call 911, put the phone on speaker, walk upstairs, and tell Amie's attacker that the cops were on the line so that there was a record of this incident in case the burglar hurt Michael when he went up there. He was afraid that the perpetrator may have a gun. Michael didn't own a gun, but he said he grew up in gun culture, and he knew it was important to have a witness to solve a crime. If both him and Amie were dead, there would be no one there to tell them what happened. He also had a condition called sciatica. It's a pinched nerve in his back, so he was no match for an armed intruder. That's why Michael said he ran for help instead of going upstairs. But they kept wondering, was Michael's story true? Daniel Fisick wasn't sure. As he went through the house again, he found several clues that this could be an attack. Downstairs, the kitchen door to the outside was wide open. Amie's TV room, which is down the hall from her bedroom, the curtain rods were scattered on a table. Amie's bed was disheveled. Her purse and books were scattered on the ground near her bed, and her phone was on the bed as well. When Fisick found the phone, he found messages from Nest. Now, Nest is a security system that sends alerts to your phone anytime there is movement on, let's say, your cameras inside your home. The recent notification was from 1:11 a.m. That's about the time that Michael left to call the police. In Amie's primary bedroom, most of the doors were open, including the balcony door, the bathroom door, and the closet. Even some of her drawers and her vanity were open. Remember, Amie was in a rush to go on that hike with Cleopatra that morning, so they wondered, did she leave it this way? It seemed unlikely. Looking at her walk-in closet, every single thing was in place. Amie liked to make her bed in the mornings, so why were the sheets crumpled? Why were the doors open? Did someone go through the room? Was someone in the room looking for something? On the balcony was that XL brand syringe, and there was also blood on the balcony door. And in the hallway outside of Amie's bathroom, there was a substance on the floor that officers identified as urine. Now, it might have been from Amie's cat, they weren't sure, but significant evidence was stacking up.
It's sticky. Beads. This is urine.
Urine, but none of that.
In the TV room, Amie's black jacket was inside out on the ground. Dark beads were strewn across the floor. They were in the TV room, where part of Amie's cross necklace had broken, and leading through the hallway, past the bathroom, into the bedroom, and onto the balcony there were beads. It was as if Amie was transported or walked or carried from one end of her suite to the other while the beads fell to the floor. The rest of her rosary necklaces was found on the ground outside beside her. Only wire and one charm was left behind because all of the beads had fallen off. Meanwhile, Amie was in the hospital fighting for her life, all alone. And that made me really sad. Amie's family wasn't there when she eventually passed away at 3:26 a.m. Because of the syringe and the state of Amie's bedroom and the house, the LAPD opened a homicide investigation. Detectives Scott Masterson and Louis Carranza were assigned to the case. They arrived at the residence at 5 in the morning, and Michael was still there. As the sun rose, they did a full sweep of Amie's home, now with daylight, including the backyard. On the stone patio where Amie was found, there was a hair scrunchie, the round charm necklace I mentioned, and some articles of clothing, including the boots that had been removed by the EMTs. This means when Amie was attacked, she had just gotten home. There was no time for her to remove her shoes, and in the area of the planters and greenery, Detective Masterson noticed a statue of some kind of deity with several arms. I wasn't sure what it was called, so if you know, please leave it in the comments if you're familiar. Well, it was missing one of its arms. Masterson asked Michael if that statue had already been broken, and Michael said no. So now they were wondering if the intruder was able to sneak into the back patio from this fence area and accidentally broke the statue's arm. When you walk around the house, you can go from the back patio to the front of the house, and it's all enclosed by a fence. Masterson noticed that the front entrance had a set of French doors, and he concluded that this must have been the point of entry. On the left door, the bottom two window panels were damaged, the glass was broken, and there were 2 small smears of blood on the door, which were swabbed for DNA. The perpetrator must have reached in to unlock the doors and cut themselves. Once Masterson entered the home, he found another blood stain on the wooden living room floor right in front of the French doors. This stain was also swabbed. Then Masterson looked at the syringe and could not identify the amber liquid. It did look like heroin, and I had to look this up because of how many types of heroin there can be. There seemed to be 3 main colors: China white, black tar, and brown. It seemed too yellow to be heroin though, and it didn't seem to belong to Amie because there were no matching syringes anywhere in the home. At this time, Michael was taken to the station for formal questioning, and he recalled waking up to Amie's screams, failing to find his phone and keys, and hopping the fence to call 911. It sounded far-fetched and not very logical, but you never know how you're going to react to a situation unless you experience it. Everyone responds to high-pressure situations differently. Michael was asked if he knew anyone who would want to hurt Amie. Michael said that it could have been one of Amie's ex-boyfriends. However, he didn't know the person's name, but he said that he knew that Amie filed a restraining order against this man, and the restraining order had expired. At 7:30 that morning, Robert Koshland woke up to 2 missed calls and a text message from Michael saying that Amie was hurt. Robert immediately called and texted Amie, but she never responded. Then Robert's phone lit up with a new call from Michael. He picked up. Michael said that Amie had been attacked, and Robert was wanted for questioning at the Hollywood police station. As he quickly made his way over there, back at the crime scene, police canvassed the whole neighborhood, and one neighbor said they had seen someone enter Amie's home when it was dark, but it was well before 1 a.m. If Michael was asleep at 6 p.m. like he said, then that wasn't him. Detectives gained access to Amie's phone and read her recent messages. She had texted several people that week, including Sarah, Rebecca, Robert, Grace, and her ex, Drew Carey. On February 13th, 2020, Amie texted Drew to ask if they could talk. Drew said yes, and then he loved Amie, even though they hadn't talked in months and he was in a new relationship, which was interesting. Masterson and Carranza applied for search warrants to access Amie's Nest footage and the next-door neighbor's security cameras. The next-door neighbors lived in a yellow house with several dogs, so if someone had been outside of Amie's home that night, it was possible there was audio and video footage of the dogs barking, so they could maybe build a timeline. Robert arrived at the Hollywood station, and he explained to the detectives that he'd been friends with Amie for 8 years. She had been the main support through a rough divorce he went through, and she'd been part of his bridal party in his recent wedding to Cleopatra. Amie and Robert saw each other about 4 times per week. They texted and called every single day. And Robert said the last time he saw Amie was on Tuesday, 4 days before, and they went to a movie. The last time they texted was the night before. Robert and Amie were planning a trip overseas with a group of their friends, and Robert had sent Amie a website for a restaurant that was recommended to him. At 1:01 a.m., Amie replied to Rebecca and also replied to Robert, telling him the restaurant looked great. I can't begin to imagine how Robert must have felt. He didn't know why he was even being called there. He didn't know that Amie had died. And now when he was notified of that, it was unbelievable. Also knowing that he would never go on that trip with her, never see her again. And he also had to deliver this news to his wife, Cleopatra. She had been hanging out with Amie only 24 hours prior. In these moments, it just feels surreal, like it's not really happening. Robert wasn't a suspect, but he knew Amie better than anyone else. Masterson asked Robert if Amie had any enemies, and Robert was quick to say yes. Gareth Pursehouse. That was his name. I don't think Robert personally ever met Gareth. However, he and Amie had talked about Gareth a lot. Now remember, Gareth was one of Amie's ex-boyfriends from way back in the day. But after almost a decade, Amie had a chance encounter with Gareth at a work event on January 16th. And Amie called and texted Robert the next day on January 17th, saying that even though she broke up with Gareth 9 years before, he was apparently still attached to her. And he wanted to keep talking about their breakup so many years after it happened. Amie was really worried. She said if anything happens to her, Gareth was responsible. That day, Amie shared her location with Robert just in case something happened. Now, it did take them about 2 hours to figure out how to do this, but Robert would do anything for Amie's peace of mind. He also suggested to her that she buy a gun, but she said she'd have to think about that. She was already taking measures to protect herself, like purchasing 2 new cameras for the back patio. That was a month ago. Robert knew for sure that from February 1st to February 14th, Amie had not heard from Gareth at all, but she had also blocked his number. After speaking with the police, Robert delivered the news of Amie's murder to all of her friends and her family, including her ex, Drew. Drew reacted with genuine distress. He burst into tears. He was asking a dozen questions, and Amie's other friends, including Sarah and Rebecca, were stunned. They gathered in Robert's home to grieve together. At this point, the police had not yet made contact with Amie's family in Pennsylvania, so they had to grieve privately. That afternoon, the LAPD reached out to Pennsylvania Police Department where Penny and Tom lived, and officers went to the Harwick residence and knocked on the door. But nobody was home. So they had to go to the next of kin, which was Amie's brother, Chris Harwick, who lived in a different city. They called that department, and when an officer arrived at Christopher's home, a young girl answered the door. There was an older woman standing behind her trying to see what was going on, and the officer asked the woman, "Do you know Chris Harwick?" And she said, "Yes, he's out of town." The officer said, "I need to inform him of something. I need to let him know that his sister has been murdered." At that moment, the woman's face dropped, and the officer realized he was speaking to Amie's mother. He felt so awful for springing the news on Penny the way that he did. She wasn't sitting down. She wasn't ready for this information, but there's never really a good way to explain to someone that their only daughter has been taken from this world. And the officer stayed with Penny and Tom for hours, just helping them to reach out to the LAPD to answer their questions any way that he could. Chris had just gotten back this week from Afghanistan, and he and his wife Carrie were on a Valentine's Day vacation in Charleston, South Carolina. They'd asked Penny and Tom to stay with their kids over the weekend. Saturday night, Chris and Carrie got a text from one of their kids saying that the police were at their house. Without context, Chris, of course, panicked. He called his dad, but Tom didn't pick up. Chris' thoughts were all over the place. He didn't know what was happening, and he was worried something could have happened to his parents. Never in a million years could he have imagined the truth. Finally, when Tom picked up Chris's call and informed him that Amie had been murdered, Chris immediately hopped in his car with his wife, and they went back to Pennsylvania on Sunday morning. Family and friends worked together to figure out how to make this news public. Not all publicity is good publicity, I'm sure we all know that. And Robert was concerned that all the news articles would just say Drew Carey's ex-fiance was murdered instead of using Amie's name. And it's a sad reality that in the world of YouTube, social media, anything online or in the news, if you want people to click on articles and you want people to read things and watch videos, then unfortunately, you have to make the title interesting, right? But you also want to honor the person's life and convey how interesting and amazing they were. Despite their best efforts, though, for people to focus on Amie's name and what she had done in her life, the media ran with a story of a Hollywood sex therapist being murdered. And it's true, but it really doesn't capture her story. As for the investigation, detectives looked into Gareth Purcell's after talking with Robert. Amie had tried to take 2 restraining orders out against Gareth. In the spring of 2011, Amie filed a report about a domestic incident that happened with Gareth when he forced her onto the ground, covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming, and was kicking her. Amie took photographs to document her injuries, which was enough proof. The charge went through, but in June of 2011, the charge was dropped. Amie had not gone to court to prosecute him, which shows that she was scared of charging him because she didn't want to face him in court. She also didn't want him to be angry and then take his anger out on her. We've heard this time and time again. Yes, we want to get a restraining order, but no, we do not want to be in the same room with the person who mistreated us. From 2011 to 2012, Amie called the police on Gareth many times and filed another court order on March 22nd of 2012. This one was in response to several incidents, and I will go in chronological order. Amie went through a lot. Amie described fights in May of 2011. She said they would get very heated. One time she threw a pillow at Gareth and he bashed her head against the floor. Amie said in the court order, quote, "In mid-May, there were multiple arguments in which Gareth Purcell choked me, suffocated me, pushed me against walls, kicked me, dropped me to the ground with force restrained me, slammed my head into the ground, and punched me with a closed fist, causing sore ankles, whiplash, bruises on arms, large bruise for 3 weeks from a punch on the leg, a sore back, and a hurt knee," end quote. Amie also described bleeding, broken blood vessels, and the inability for her to walk. Gareth told Amie that the reason he hurt her was because she made him mad. Amie told him to go to a therapist to work on his anger issues, but Gareth refused. He could not take responsibility for his actions and blamed everything on Amie. Amie said on June 18th of 2011, Gareth was driving with her in the car on the freeway in heavy traffic. They got into a fight, and Gareth pushed Amie out of the vehicle and left her on the side of the road. Now, that is very dangerous. Afterward, Amie tried to separate from Gareth, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. He would apologize, gaslight her, and love bomb her over and over again. Gareth would stand outside her home, look through her windows, and text her all hours of the day. When she blocked him, he would recruit his friends to send Amie photos and links to love songs. And when his friends refused, he would ask them to pick sides. It was either him or Amie. Gareth told Amie that he planned to escalate his behavior, like it will get worse. Those are his words. It will get worse. And that's terrifying. So not only was he mistreating her, he was stalking her, and Amie was brave enough to try to get a restraining order in 2011, and now she was brave enough to come back and file another one in 2012. Amie wrote that Gareth moved out of her apartment halfway through July of 2011 and didn't pay rent for the last month, but he kept showing up at the place. On January 11th of 2012, he approached Amie when she got back from a trip, and Amie was in the car, and they had a conversation which then turned into an argument. She said, quote, "It progressed to him physically pulling me out of the car. I got a bloody nose from his roughness. He then took my suitcases and threw them overhead very far, damaging them," end quote. After that, Amie called the police. Then things escalated. Between March 18th and March 21st of 2012, Amie saw Gareth every day. She said, quote, "Gareth came to my apartment and smashed 10 picture frames on my door, creating damage to art. He broke into the complex to do this, created a hazard for kids in the building, and texted me things will get worse. I called the police," end quote. The next day, he broke into her building again and taped a bouquet of 48 flowers to her apartment door. The next day, he broke in again, standing outside the door and playing music. After that, on March 21st, he sent threatening emails to all of Amie's friends. Amie had asked him to leave her alone again and again, but he would not respect her. He would not take no for an answer. Amie testified against Gareth, and on April 12th of 2012, the restraining order was granted. Gareth was ordered to stay at least 100 yards away from Amie at all times. In California, the longest restraining order option is 5 years, and Amie was given 3. On April 11th of 2015, that order expired, so she was no longer legally protected. Knowing all this, detectives had probable cause to arrest Gareth, who lived 51 miles away at 8148 Cabora Drive in Playa del Rey. At 4:30 p.m., 15 hours after the 911 call came in, Gareth was arrested by LAPD in a traffic stop outside of his home. He was driving in his car with a woman named Angeline in the passenger seat. Angeline had gone to Gareth's house that day to celebrate a late Valentine's Day with him, and she was helping him organize his tools before he drove her home. Can you imagine going on dates with a guy and then being there when he's arrested for murder? That must have been terrifying. Gareth was charged with first-degree murder and held on a $2 million bond. When they took him in jail and stripped him down, they noticed injuries all over his body. There were cuts to his knees, bruises on his face, and even a black eye, which he first claimed he got from shaving, but then said it was from some construction work around the house that he was completing. All of this was pretty incriminating. He also had what appeared to be a bite mark on his bicep. It was all adding up. It looked like Gareth was responsible for Amie's death. But they didn't have any details about what happened. Was Amie hurt in the heat of the moment? Was her death an accident? Or was this planned? Detective Dave Vinton obtained a search warrant for Gareth's home at 5:35 p.m. and inside, Vinton documented everything he saw, and there were several items of concern or interest. A pair of black and white tennis shoes, a pair of black shorts with a white stripe down the side and a white drawstring, and there was also a pair of tan and black husky gloves in the living room. Now, this is California. This is LA. Even in February, it doesn't snow here. It's not that cold. So why would Gareth need gloves? Now, these were like the heavy-duty kind that you might do construction with, I guess. But I think the most important thing they found was what was in the kitchen. On a kitchen shelf was an XL brand syringe. The syringe had a yellow residue, like it had been full of an amber liquid, but the liquid had been poured out. It looked identical to the syringe at the crime scene. So they got a search warrant for Gareth's phone, which revealed that he had texted multiple women on Valentine's Day to say that he was busy. One of those women was Natasha Paulson, and one was Angeline, the woman that was in a car with him when he was arrested. He texted Angeline at 6:46 p.m. Friday night to say that he was on his way home and was too busy to meet up with her that week. But Saturday, the day after Valentine's, he texted, "What are you up to?" and that they should meet up. Not only was this wishy-washy, it gave the impression that Gareth was busy with something on Valentine's Day, and now he wasn't because maybe he needed an alibi. There was also no record of Gareth calling or texting Amie in the last 2 months, but we know that's not true. So on his phone, he had deleted messages and call logs. On February 16th, detectives finally obtained the recordings from the security cameras next door. And this is where it got interesting. I'm going to show you some footage from the next door neighbor's camera. At 8:52 p.m., the motion sensors are triggered. Someone has entered their property through the empty lot behind their home, which is filled with bushes and greenery. It's a white man dressed in black with stripes on his shorts. He moves in from the left, and then he covers the camera with a gloved hand. The gloves are black on the palms, and you know what? The husky gloves are also black on the palms, the ones that were found in Gareth's living room. The intruder is moving too fast to properly see his face, but he does match Gareth's description. He covers the camera for 30 seconds, fiddling with the camera to make it reset and stop recording. Then, a minute later at 8:53, the intruder does the same thing to another camera. So he must have been lying in wait in Amie's home from 9 p.m. to 1 o'clock in the morning. Then just after 1 a.m., the neighbor's camera catches the same man. He's not wearing a hat this time. He has the same bag in his hand. He's wearing the same outfit, and he's jumping a fence and running towards their camera that's on their door. From this viewpoint, you can get a much better look at this man. He's wearing white and black shoes, black shorts with a white stripe down the side, and a white drawstring, a black shirt, and he has the same hairstyle as Gareth Pursehouse. Later at 1:11 a.m., another man wearing a white t-shirt runs up the neighbor's home. This is Michael. Now on camera, he's breathing hard, he's knocking on the doors, the dogs are barking, and after 30 seconds, when no one answers, he walks away. This is the footage that pretty much exonerated Michael. He wasn't the intruder. He wasn't the one jumping the fence in the backyard. The timelines match up to his story. Amie's autopsy was then performed in the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's office on February 18th. Her manner of death was homicide, and the cause of death was blunt force trauma to her head, which appeared to be from the fall off the balcony. Amie sustained trauma to her head and her torso with several broken bones, including a shattered pelvis. She had defensive wounds on her fingers and hands, as well as abrasions to her arm, elbow, and both shoulders. This meant that she was attacked, and she fought hard against her attacker. Fingernail clippings were taken and sent to a lab for DNA processing. Amie also had broken blood vessels called petechiae around her eyes and wounds to her neck, which were signs of manual strangulation. Based on the severity of these wounds, Amie was likely unconscious by the time she fell from the balcony, and it's likely that she had actually been thrown off the balcony with the intent of further injury and death. A toxicology report was done to figure out if the attacker had used that syringe to incapacitate Amie. They did a full age screen, which is a homicide screening that tests for larger categories of drugs, including opiates, but it doesn't cover nicotine or prescription medications. But the results showed that there were no drugs or alcohol in Amie's system. Also on the 18th, detectives had a sit-down conversation with Dr. Hernando Chavez, Amie's longtime friend and confidant in her therapy practice. Hernando told the detectives that he had been with Amie on the night of January 16th, the night that Amie reconnected with Gareth, or was confronted by Gareth, I should say. Hernando said that it was at the annual XBiz Awards, which is a 4-day-long conference that ends in a red carpet event for big names in the adult entertainment world. In 2020, it was hosted by Stormy Daniels. You might be familiar with that name from Donald Trump's trial. But because of Amie's work with the Pineapple Support Team, she was invited to speak on a panel about mental health. Amie wasn't initially invited, but a panelist couldn't attend. So Amie jumped at the opportunity to network. On Thursday night, the red carpet was held at the JW Marriott Hotel in downtown LA, and Amie made plans to go with Hernando. Amie dressed up in a black lace gown, a cute headband, and a black clutch. She had her signature red lipstick on, and she was excited about this event. She was truly in her element, especially walking the red carpet. Amie and Hernando arrived a little late, but Amie wanted to take pictures, but there was a line of 40 people for the red carpet. They waited in that line next to Aspen Jamison, who was one of Hernando's friends. Amie had never met her before, but they just got to talking, and Hernando offered to go get Aspen a drink from the bar. While standing in the drink line, Hernando gets a call from Aspen. He picks up, and it was loud because it was crowded and he couldn't hear very well, so he just hung up on Aspen. But she called again. And this time she shouted that Hernando needs to get back there immediately. So Hernando rushed back to the crowd. He sees Amie having this heated conversation with a man that he doesn't recognize. This man is wearing a maroon blazer and blue jeans with a camera in his hand. It was Gareth Pursehouse. Now Amie is walking away from the crowd and going to sit on a bench, speaking with Gareth. Hernando told Detective Carranza that he followed Amie just to make sure she was okay. Amie had pulled Gareth to where the public restrooms are and the bench was, in sight of the security guards, and she did this on purpose. Hernando heard Gareth say, "You ruined my life, bitch." And then when Gareth saw that Hernando was standing there, he changed his tone of voice. He tried to compose himself, which is very interesting. Hernando asked if everything was okay, and Amie said yes. So Hernando said that he reluctantly went back to the red carpet to hold Amie's space in line. Here's part of the context. Gareth worked the X-Bids Awards every year as a photographer, but Amie didn't know this. She spotted him while she was talking to Aspen, and she was hoping he wouldn't notice her. But then Gareth made a beeline for Amie and interrupted her conversation to say, "Funny seeing you here. Why are you here?" Gareth was yelling things like, "You're a hypocrite, you broke my heart," in front of hundreds of people. His arms were flailing around, and he was on the verge of a breakdown. Amie was embarrassed. She went into therapist mode and tried to de-escalate the situation, agreeing to have a private conversation with Gareth so that this wouldn't happen again, so they could resolve whatever this was. Hernando waited as Amie and Gareth talked. He estimated they talked for about 45 minutes or more. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he could read body language. Amie was listening intently and setting clear boundaries. Gareth was agitated and upset, covering his face with his hands, but the red carpet was about to end. So Hernando finally told Amie it was time to go. It was time to take pictures and leave this area and this man. They proceeded to take those photos on the red carpet and then enter the ballroom for the ceremony. At dinner, Hernando noticed that Amie was quiet and withdrawn. They did take pictures and they tried to enjoy the show, but her good mood had been ruined. 10 minutes before the X-Biz Gala ended, Gareth came back. He stopped by Amie's table and he asked to talk to her again. I mean, what doesn't he understand? What does he have to say? It was almost a decade when they broke up, but he was begging her to please just let him talk. I mean, he ruined his chance in 2011 to have anything good with Amie again. But Amie did go back to the same bench with Gareth. As the hotel cleared out, Hernando hung back waiting for Amie, texting her throughout her conversation with Gareth, checking in to make sure she was okay. Now, this talk lasted another 50 minutes or so. The cleaning crew was almost done when Hernando interrupted the conversation and said they need to go home. Gareth had said what he needed to say in his opinion, and he wanted Amie to leave. Amie and Hernando then rushed out of there, and Hernando said that she was looking behind her shoulder the whole time, making sure Gareth hadn't followed them. Amie didn't want to talk until they got back to her car and locked the doors. That's how scared she was. She finally let out a sigh of relief and explained that Gareth was her ex that she used to have a restraining order against, that he was obsessed with her. But she had no clue he still had these feelings, and that really terrified her. Amie was supposed to go to another event after this where she would actually be the photographer taking photos of her friend's show, but Amie canceled. She was so shook up about what happened that she and Hernando just drove to a diner where they had a late night meal, and they figured out what Amie should do next. Gareth was 3 years older than Amie, born on July 4th of 1978, and he grew up in San Diego. Amie's friends described him as an LA Ken doll who failed at becoming both an actor and a comedian. When Gareth and Amie first got together, her brother Chris met Gareth and thought that he was nice, but that his sister could do much better. But Amie liked Gareth's attention at first. She was open with Hernando and her other friends about her abandonment and attachment wounds from being adopted. Of course, Amie was taking steps to heal. She was in school for therapy, and she had her own therapist. She knew that healthy relationships required boundaries, but Gareth overstepped her boundaries all the time. And at first it was little ones in the relationship, but then it led to bigger ones until he showed his true colors. He was a jack of all trades and a master of one, and that was manipulation. Amie was a loving, compassionate person who believed in making a relationship work, but Gareth took advantage of her time and time again, advantage of her kindness, asking her to forgive him for the most outrageous behaviors. And we only know what he was doing behind closed doors because Amie reported him. There could have been a lot more, and there probably was. Friends and family started to notice that as soon as Amie started dating Gareth, they weren't seeing her anymore. Gareth tried to sabotage her relationships and even her career. So Amie had to break up with him. She said things were over, and for some time, Gareth just wouldn't get it into his head that they were really broken up. He was delusional. The restraining order did offer some distance and closure, but when it ended in 2015, Amie was really scared that she was going to see Gareth again. She thought if he saw her, his stalking behavior would re-escalate. She knows a lot about this because this is the field that she works in. If there's anything we know about stalking, it's that stalkers feed off of interactions, whether they're positive or negative. You can think a relationship has ended, but the moment they come back in contact, it triggers a downward spiral. Amie did not renew the restraining order because she didn't want to see him in court again. This is a very common thing. It happened the first time, and it was happening again. All that time went by. If she were to see him again, she was scared he would get attached again. She didn't want to make things worse, and she really thought it was over, but it wasn't over. Someone was out to get Amie. She was receiving all those nasty comments on Instagram, online, the reviews on the clinical websites, and someone had hacked into her email. She couldn't prove that it was Gareth, but all along, she thought it was. And she had every reason to believe he was capable of this. But by 2016, Amie knew that it had to be Gareth because someone broke into her house, stole her photo albums, and completely wiped her computer. They tried to erase her life. That was personal. And we know all of this information because Amie called Robert that day and she told him she knew it was Gareth. She said her stalker knew where she lived, knew how to break her down. Amie wanted to go to the police, but she didn't have cameras set up in her home, so she couldn't prove it was Gareth. So instead, she moved. Then it was radio silence for 4 years. Amie didn't hear from him until that run-in in January of 2020. That night at the diner, Hernando told Amie she really needed to improve her security in her home. She talked about changing her locks, buying pepper spray or mace, and getting Nest camera systems. Hernando listened intently and he asked Amie if she would feel safer maybe coming back to his house that night. But Amie said she felt safe because her roommate Michael was at home. Hernando also asked Amie that night if she was thinking about possibly calling the police and filing another order. But Amie told him she would have to think about that, and they both went their separate ways that night. For Detectives Masterson and Carranza, there was no doubt that Gareth was at Amie's house on the night of February 14th. Robert had brought them even more evidence. Robert had gone through Amie's possessions and discovered a day planner where Amie had written down all of her passwords to her accounts, and Robert gained access to her Gmail. That's when they discovered an email that Amie had sent to herself. On January 17th, that would be just after she got back home from talking to Hernando about what happened at the XBiz Awards. It was at 3:09 a.m. The subject line was GP, which stands for Gareth Pursehouse, his initials. Amie wrote, quote, "Tonight, I felt very scared. I went to the award show with Hernando. We arrived, we walked in a very long line to do the red carpet. As we were waiting, I saw Gareth walk by with a camera. Clearly he was working. I decided to ignore him and just not look in that direction. I thought maybe he would not notice me. Hernando went to the bar to get a drink, and I was waiting with his friend in line. Gareth came up behind me and started screaming, 'Why are you here?' He looked dysregulated. His eyes looked out of control. He started screaming, 'You don't even like porn. You shouldn't be here. Why are you here?' And then he started to scream. He started looking like he was going to cry. He was breathing heavily and flailing his arms around. I didn't want to make a scene or scare anybody else, so I said, 'Hey, do you need to talk?' And we walked over to the side. We sat close by the bathrooms. I made sure to look and make sure there were both security people and a lot of attendees very close by. He was sobbing. His head was in his hands. He was hyperventilating. He was distorting his face up and shaking violently. I was scared and I felt I needed to neutralize the situation. I didn't think he was going to attack me in that moment, but this clearly showed me how obsessed he was. He told me he thinks about me every day, and every day he cries. He told me he lost his job when we broke up because he couldn't work. He told me no matter what he did, he couldn't stop obsessing over me. He told me I was a cheater and a liar because he thought we were still together when I believed we had broken up. He recited text messages that I sent him from the time frame about 9 years ago. He recited the date, who they were to, and exactly what was said, word for word. I couldn't believe it. I was very scared. He said he wasn't able to move on. He was dated, but nobody was me. He said he thinks about me constantly and he can't watch the TV shows that we watched together, hear the songs that we liked, the names we would call each other, or even the smell of vanilla, or he has panic attacks. I sat there with him for about 20 minutes or so. In my mind, I wanted to neutralize the situation. I thought maybe I could make him see me as a neutral person, that maybe these things would stop. It terrifies me that he's been obsessed with me for 9 years. Can't move on, cries and throws tantrums. He's malicious, highly intelligent, and focused on harming me. End quote. Amie was scared that Gareth's behavior would escalate, and the evidence of her fear was in that email. Investigators also found text messages between Amie and Grace and Amie and Hernando talking about buying pepper spray, installing security cameras. She said a handyman replaced the locks on her doors. Amie also texted Robert on January 18th and said, quote, "I ran into my scariest ex last night of 10 years. He yelled at me in public and then acted really crazy and told me how obsessed with me he was. I tried to de-escalate him. Things he said were very scary. I took safety measures today, but realistically scared for my safety. My anxiety isn't bad now. I just realistically think something could happen to me," end quote. She also messaged Hernando to say Gareth found her phone number and had reached out to her. Now, this was after they saw each other at the awards. He has now found her number. Remember that Gareth had no messages to Amie on his phone? Well, Amie had several recent messages from Gareth on her phone. Literally the morning after that award show, January 17th at 11:51 a.m., Gareth texted Amie, quote, "I interneted your number. I recognize it now that I see it, if I'm allowed to text," end quote. I was thinking, in what world would he be allowed to text her, talk to her in any way? This is not okay. Amie responded with what I call a butt message, a butt text, where you are not meaning to, but there's just a bunch of jumbled up letters and words that don't make sense. Because she was in the middle of another phone call when this happened. So it was just leaving like P's and O's and stuff like that. But Gareth responds to these random texts with a joke. And Amie finally sees what's going on. She says, "Oh, wow, my text was left open and I'm on a call. Sorry." He continued to text as she was on the phone, and he said, quote, "Not sure if you're done because you said, 'How do we finish this now?' last night, but if we can meet again," end quote. And I'm thinking, let me get this straight. He wasn't sure if they were done. Amie had been trying to move on for almost a decade. What didn't he understand about the end of the relationship? He's asking her to meet again after all these years of mistreatment and 2 hours, basically, of Amie speaking with him at the award show. Amie finally put her foot down. She replied with a very strong boundary. She said, quote, "I think it was really good that we were able to speak last night. I'm sure there's a lot more you want to process and say to me, but I think that was a lot for both of us. I hope you were able to hear me last night when I said that I was sorry for anything that caused you suffering, and I forgive you for the things that you did to me. I think right now it's best to have some space, and I don't mean that in a negative way. The past is sad and triggering for both of us. I think we ended our talk last night well. We can be civil from a distance, respect each other, and move forward with our own lives," end quote. I think it's pretty clear she wants nothing to do with him, but she's trying to remain so kind and not escalate the situation. But Gareth, of course, responded with, quote, "So you're still just gone? That's exactly my nightmare, and sadly what I expected," end quote. As if he wasn't solely responsible for Amie needing to set these boundaries. Amie obviously did not reply to that message. Gareth texted her again at 2 p.m., but she didn't answer. He texted her again at 6:45, and she didn't reply that time either. On Sunday, the next day, he called her, and he left a voice message. And in that message, he sounds like he's been crying, he sounds unstable, and he's begging Amie to let him say what he needs to say. But what else does he need to say? I mean, he couldn't take rejection, so Amie blocked him back then, got a restraining order, and now she blocks him again because she doesn't want calls or messages or these voice messages. She didn't want any of this. She also knew that continuing to engage with his behavior would only make things worse. And she was doing everything in her power to keep her distance and stay safe while living her life. That's a lot. It's a lot to think about, and it's what so many other women go through. And you never really know what someone's capable of when we know what he's done before. I have to tell you that on February 18th at 10:25 p.m., Gareth actually gets bailed out of jail. He posted the $200,000, probably from a bail bondman, he got a loan, and he walked free on Wednesday morning. So he was just in jail for 24 hours? I don't know, but people were terrified. They couldn't believe. Amie's friends and family were like, how? How does he just walk out of here after murdering our friend? The day that Gareth is let out of jail, one of Amie's ex-boyfriends, he's the guitarist from Red Hot Chili Peppers. His name is Dave Navarro. I think he's now in Jane's Addiction. But he posted on Instagram that he just called the police to tell them to please rearrest Gareth because he is dangerous. Now, there was a rumor circulating that Dave heard through one of Gareth's friends, actually, that Gareth believed Amie cheated on him with Dave in 2011. Gareth was still blaming Dave for ruining their relationship. He's thinking that this is why him and Amy's not together, when that is not what happened. So now Gareth's out of jail, capable of revenge, and Dave knew that Gareth dated around, and he was actually scared that Gareth might hurt another woman. Dave wasn't the only one of Amy's friends to call the LAPD, and lucky for them, Gareth was found near the airport, which is a violation of his bond. So the police were already requesting another warrant, and this time with no bail. Gareth was finally rearrested and charged with first-degree murder, first-degree burglary, and special circumstances of lying in wait, which meant he was eligible for either life in prison or the death penalty at the time. Amy's funeral was held on February 27th in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. She got the funeral that she always wanted. I know that sounds weird, but just bear with me. Beautiful, elaborate headstone and an open casket. She was buried with a picture of her cat, Marquis. Her parents said that Amie actually called them at the end of January to let them know how she wanted her end of life to be celebrated. Yeah. She was that scared of Gareth that she was convinced he was going to end her life. I mean, that is terrifying. It also breaks my heart that Amy's final moments, her final month, were spent in fear and with this man. After the service, friends and family gathered to talk about Amie, to share their memories, and they were so glad that Amie loved to take pictures and captured so many happy moments on camera. I think it is a good reminder, I'm sure we all do it anyway, but to take photos whenever you can, of yourself too, because you never know how much the people in your life will cherish those photos. All funeral donations went to Rock to Recovery, which was an organization that uses music to treat addiction and trauma. Back in LA, Amy's friends were planning a memorial of Amie in her favorite cemetery, where Amie loved to go on walks around the beautiful lake. And Tom and Penny said they were grateful for everyone's support, and the world had lost a champion of women, but they had lost their daughter. They wanted Amie to be remembered for her love of music and helping people, and they didn't want Amy's murder to be a statistic. In the following months, a hashtag, Justice for Amie, was created to improve laws around stalking and DV. A petition proposed several changes. First, California could give the option for a restraining order without an expiration date, so that people would not have to face these people in court multiple times. Why should you have to face the person that mistreated you in person, ever? Second, the creation of an online stalker registry, so that people can make sure their partner doesn't have a history of obsessive behavior. And third, early intervention options for victims of stalking. And fourth, mandatory long-term therapy for anyone convicted of these crimes. Stalking cases are some of the worst cases that I cover, and Amy's murder made me very angry. I'm angry for a lot of reasons. I'm angry that the world is not a safer place for women. We shouldn't have to take extreme measures to protect ourselves. And I could count many, and I'm sure you know what they are. Everywhere we go, we're thinking about it. Gareth Pursehouse's trial was delayed due to COVID and was finally held on August 29th of 2023. Despite his motive, he pleaded not guilty. California had recently ruled that the death penalty was no longer an option, so Gareth faced life in prison without parole. Amy's family and friends were confident that prosecutor Victor Avila had a solid case. In opening statements, the prosecution read Gareth's text to Amie. They said that he had a compulsion to pursue Amie, and when Amie agreed to speak with him at the awards event, it fueled his delusions and his attachment. When she blocked him, he took her life. Avila said that Gareth broke into Amy's home at 8:50 p.m., hours before she got home from the Nomad. He waited in her bedroom, possibly even under the covers in her bed, for her to return. There was a struggle in the TV room. Gareth pulled off Amy's jacket and broke her necklace as they were struggling all over the room and knocked over curtain rods. He strangled Amie as she screamed for help. Avila speculated that once she was unconscious, Gareth heard Michael leaving the house for help and lifted Amie over the balcony before making his escape out the kitchen door. Now, the defense attorneys, Robin Bernstein Love and Evan Frenzel, had a different story to tell. They said Gareth broke into Amy's home, but not for the reasons the prosecution said. It was because he was depressed and wanted reassurance from the woman that he still loved. He didn't intend to kill her. He wanted to have a simple conversation. But Amie wasn't interested, and that conversation escalated. They admitted that Gareth did strangle Amie in the heat of the moment, and to get away, Amie decided to climb down from the balcony, and in the process, she slipped and fell. To make a strong argument for this, the defense showed a picture of Amie where she's posing on a balcony railing. She's got this beautiful landscape of trees in the background. She's comfortable posing on this balcony railing. Although there was no date on this photo, but they were saying If Amie's comfortable posing on a balcony railing, she must be comfortable climbing down from the balcony. But I gotta ask, if she was able to break free from this man, why wouldn't she escape down the stairs? It seems so far-fetched and very convenient for the defense to say this. She knew her home better than anyone else. Why would she risk going down a balcony? And if she did, it was because she was so terrified by this monster, who, by the way, was way bigger than she was. Amie was only around 5'5" and 118 pounds. Gareth was 6'4" and over 230 pounds. She was no match for him. So either way, it is still his fault, no matter how she ended up on the ground below. The prosecution brought forward Michael Herman, who seemed very nervous to testify. Michael had some new information from the night of February 14th that he had remembered on February 20th. Michael was sleeping in his bedroom, and he woke up to the sound of glass crashing to the floor. He didn't check the time, but it was dark outside. Michael thought that Amie was just back from her show, and he heard the sound of footsteps leading from the living room to the kitchen, and he thought that somebody was just cleaning up the glass and then walking up the stairs and going to sleep. He figured it was probably Marquis that had knocked something over and Amie cleaning it up. Michael turned on the TV, and for a while he was awake, and then he drifted back to sleep without a second thought about someone else being in his home. This memory lined up with the Nest footage. We know that the intruder broke into Amie's home at 8:53 p.m., and that was probably the sound of Gareth damaging the French doors. It wasn't a plate that crashed. It wasn't Amie picking it up. It was Gareth walking through the house. Now, apart from the DNA, there was no hairs or fingerprints pinning Gareth to the crime scene, but we know that he had those husky gloves. We also know from the video that the person who came into the home was wearing gloves. They were also wearing black, and they were wearing black and white shoes and dark shorts with a white stripe on them and a white drawstring. But I'm sure you're curious because I just said DNA. Well, the DNA results were in. The blood on the patio ground where Amie fell belonged to her, and so did the blood on her balcony door. But when it came to the blood on the front door and in the living room, there was a 1 in 1 septillion chance that it was anyone other than Gareth Pursehouse. And that is a number with 24 zeros. Gareth definitely broke in through that door. And what's more, he strangled Amie. The clippings of Amie's fingernails showed that Amie was the major contributor for DNA, but Gareth was a 14% minor contributor for her left fingernails and 6% for the right fingernails. Why else would this man's skin or his cells or his sweat or whatever was under her fingernails be anywhere near this woman? And then there was the syringe. Forensics examiner Maureen Bradley testified that when the crime scene lab did an age screening for the amber liquid, it wasn't heroin. In fact, it wasn't even a controlled substance. They had sent it to the FBI lab for even more comprehensive testing, and it ended up being nicotine. I know many of you have probably tried nicotine in your life, but not injected it. And please don't. It can be lethal. Nicotine is usually absorbed through the skin, through the mouth, by smoking it through the lungs. This means nicotine absorption takes time. But when it comes to pure nicotine, 1 liter of 99.9 pure nicotine can be purchased online for just $100. Concentrated nicotine is sometimes used in vapes. But Dr. Alan Wu found that the amber liquid was 86.9% nicotine in its injectable form. Especially at the concentration it was at, this was deadly. Whether you inject it under your skin, into a muscle, or even into a vein, it's poison. And it will only take a few minutes to cause someone to die. Why would Gareth bring a needle full of a poison to Amie's house if he didn't plan to kill her? Well, on cross-examination, the defense argued that Gareth brought the syringe to end his own life. Still, they didn't make a solid case for Gareth's mental health or his present history of thoughts of this. But there was a chance that Gareth brought the syringe to manipulate Amie. He might have threatened to end his life with the syringe if she didn't take him back, for example. But that was just speculation. I think the important thing to note is that self-injected, self-harm is very rare. There are a lot of ways to administer poison, and injection is not usually associated with taking your own life, but is associated with murder. Also, the defense questioned the integrity of the DNA testing and the reason the curtain rods were in the TV room. They had excuses for everything. They said, her friend Cleopatra was redesigning and putting up new curtains. And they called no witnesses. They did not have a compelling case. The facts are that Gareth Pursehouse premeditated this murder. He wore gloves in all black. He brought a syringe full of a poison to a crime scene and waited for Amie to arrive with the sole intention of hurting her. He probably wanted it to look like she had done this to herself. but everyone around her knew she wouldn't. The jury found him guilty and he was convicted on September 29th of 2023 and sentenced in December, and he will rot in prison for the rest of his life. I can't even look at his face. And speaking of face, he looked entirely different when he was in court than he did when he was out in Hollywood trying to make it big in comedy. But who's laughing now, Gareth? You're a monster. Chris said that his sister Amie's murder was like a chapter of a book that he could never close, and the sentencing allowed him to move past to the next chapter. The past years have been very tough for Amie's family, especially for her parents. They've tried to be very strong, but most importantly, they've tried to keep Amie's story alive. And now I'm going to ask a favor from all of you, if you can. Her friend Robert has created a GoFundMe to raise funds for Amie's memorial. One of Amie's friends is a sculpture artist, and she wants to construct a bronze statue featuring Amie and her cat Marquis. It'll be modeled off the Greek goddess Aphrodite with a bronze garland featuring the symbols of love. Underneath, there will be 2 plaques, one talking about Amie's life and the other about intimate partner violence. This memorial will be put up in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery once they finally reach their goal. This is a huge project. They've only raised $11,000, which I was actually very surprised about, and the goal is $175,000. I want this dream to come true for Amie, so if you can spare anything, and if you can't, please just share the link, share the GoFundMe, anything you can do. But if we all just give a little bit, I know how many people watch these videos. I do have a strong reach. And also if you like and subscribe and share the video, that helps the reach go even further. But I know if we all did a little bit, we could make this dream a reality. So I'm going to link the GoFundMe below. Please, please do what you can. And thank you so much for being here for Amie's story. Like I had said, this case, it affected me. I wanted to do even more. But so many times when I sat down to tell this story, I couldn't. I recorded this whole video last week and I just couldn't get through it. And I had to rewrite some things to make it a little easier for me. But I want to leave you with something that Robert said on his Instagram last year. He posted a photo with Amie, and this is what the caption said. It said, quote, "You had this photo of us propped up on your makeup table. I have it now. I have your handsome man, Marquis, and you would be happy to know he's healthy and well. In fact, he's put on a few extra pounds, so I fat shame him as part of his breakfast routine. You insisted that he loves being fat shamed and given a little spank on the butt before he eats. I have all of the memories of meals, parties, the nights on the couch watching movies, crying intentionally for hours by watching Thai insurance commercials, endless discussions about decorating oddities, relationships, and the nature of life. You were always there for me when I needed advice, and I too took your calls even at 3 a.m. when you were upset about something. I miss our daily conversations. It's my hope and mission to ensure others know about you even after I'm not around to tell stories of you. I know that you still inspire your many friends in their daily lives, and I also know that you've touched countless strangers too." End quote. I personally hope that Amie's story has moved you in the way that it's moved me, and my heart goes out to all of her friends and family. I want to note that because I did do so much research, I could not fit it in one video, so I'm doing Amie's case on my other true crime channel, Dark Livity, that I do with my husband. We also have a new series where we go on location where these cases took place. So we will be showing you Amie's home and also where the monster was living at the time. I know that some people like to visually see that from the point of view of someone right there. So if that's your thing, check it out. And thank you so much for being here. I will see you in my next video. Bye.